Hi, here we are today talking to Sandra Murphy of EquidGel, and we're going to talk today about another product which is called Hydrate. Um, and Sandra and I have just been having a bit of a discussion, and I sort of said, controversially, that this is a problem to a solution that doesn't exist. And Sandra came back with a very convincing argument saying the problem does exist. People just don't know it doesn't exist. And so I said, well, let's jump on a quick Zoom and we'll have a quick talk about problems that people aren't appreciating and recognizing. And we'll talk about how some of the top riders are recognizing this problem to the point where they will actually give their horses drips before competition. So it's not completely made up, as some of you might be thinking. So let me just hand over to Sandra and let her introduce her product, which is called Hydrate, and then we'll go from there.
Hi, Roger. Thank you for having me on today. I developed Hydrate after developing EquidGel because I recognised that there was a lot of horses out there that weren't drinking away from home. And one of the reasons why I found this out is because I did a lot of endurance GB. And I found that horses were taking in at the vet stops. They were taking in EquidGel, when they were doing their vettings. And so I thought, well, let's find a way of developing something that we can give people the peace of mind, so that they can make sure that their horses are hydrated before they go out. Because you know that if you feed a horse a feed with like a sloppy grain feed, with lots of water in, it still can't do any exercise after you fed it. It has to be, you have to wait some length of time. And the reason why you have to wait some length of time is because you've got to allow the grain to be digested in the stomach, before sort of broken down in the stomach, before it gets to the hindgut. Because if it gets to the hindgut, obviously we have dietary induced colics.
Yeah, all the problems of the grains, yes, we were talking about in our last talk.
So I decided to make a supplement that people could to use before they went out, so the horse wasn't depleted before. Now, a lot of people don't realise that the horse is suffering a depletion of their body fluids, because a horse will start showing signs of dehydration after they've lost 6% of their body weight. So 6% of body weight is 30 of a 500 kilogram horse is about 30 kilos. And so that's 30 litres. So your horse, if it's depleted, it's already lost 30 litres of water. And so, we need to make sure before they travel or before they compete that they have the fluid in them, so that they do not suffer the depletion when they get to their destination, particularly for travelling horses.
Yeah. So what we're talking about here is actually preventing. Prevention's always better than cure. So when Sandra's saying that horses are losing water, it isn't that it's running out of them and they're having a pee. It's actually they sweat, or it comes out in their through their airways as water vapor, but it's the water that's lost through all this in the cells. So 6% out of a cell doesn't sound like very much, but actually when you are dehydrated, it can reduce performance significantly. And of course, when horses are on a performance reduction plane, then they are more likely to injure. They won't be performing out on a show jumping, for example. They won't be able to do the clear round when they're competing that they can do because they've done it at home. So, and Sandra was explaining to me, the stress of being out and competing, horses tend not to want to drink water. And my response was, we just give them water and they'll drink it and they'll be fine. And it's like, well, actually, horses don't drink as much when they're feeling stressed as flight animals, not used to their surroundings. They're in an environment they're not used to, and so and the water might not taste the same. We go if you travel and drink tap water around the country in different areas, it will taste differently. And we certainly know that in some areas of the country they will be adding fluoride and things that we don't want in the water. So and that will also be the levels of chlorine will be different as well. So different water in different areas will taste differently, and horses can tell it. You know, it's that whole, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Until now. And the other thing is, the frontiersmen in the States, they used to take their horse to the water, and if the horse drank the water, they knew it was good enough for them to drink. So water and horses are very sensitive to what the water is and what the water quality is. So, having that degree of dehydration, just 6%, as Sandra is saying, is actually quite significant in a performance scale. And so what Hydrate is aiming to do is feed some. I'll get Sandra to go through the regime in a minute, but basically you give it before you go. Also, when you get to the other end and competing, and obviously there for a few days, then you can use the EquidGel as your feed while you're away to get the water going in that way too. But obviously Hydrate is there for emergencies, and also for before you go and when you come back and things like that. So Sandra, if you were taking a horse to a show, what would be your regime?
So I mean, I would feed EquidGel anyway in the morning. They would have an EquidGel feed in the morning, like we do a daily ration. But if I was going to a show particularly, I would make sure I take a tub of Hydrate with me, and the tub makes up there's 6 servings in a tub. And we also do a grab bag that has 3 servings in. So what I would suggest to people is to have a 5 litre, 1 serving in the morning before they leave in the lorry or the trailer. And then I would give them a 5 litre serving during the day when they were in between their competition, and then 5 litres before you leave to come home. Now, the reason why you can give this before you travel or you compete is because it's fibre based, it's grass based. And so what's happening then is when you give the horse the Hydrate mixed up, they drink it, and it doesn't sit in the stomach, as in it doesn't get broken down in the stomach, so that we don't get hydrochloric acid build up in the stomach, because fibre doesn't get broken down with acid. No. So then
and we don't want the ulcers from it, from the hydrochloric acid either. So we want the water to go through to the hindgut where it's absorbed, and then and take the fibre there, which actually provides a bit of fermentation energy for the horses for competing and for travelling as well.
But the good thing about Hydrate is it actually makes a fibre mat. Now, a lot of vets will say, give the horse some alfalfa before you do competitions, and that's because it floats on top of the gastric juices in the stomach, and giving a fibre mat will help reduce the splash of acid onto the ulcers. So if you do have a horse with ulcers, it means that you're creating that fibre mat with the Hydrate, and it's also then, like Roger just said, it's then allowed to go through to the hindgut, and because it's such a high level of soluble fibre, it holds on to a lot of water. So Hydrate actually holds on to 10 times more water than sugar beet. So it actually holds water to take through to the hindgut, and then it's released in the hindgut, slow release, and it allows the horse to replenish its body fluids.
Yeah. So basically, once the role of the hindgut, one of the roles, obviously in the horse, it's a big fermentation area. The colon is absolutely huge in a horse if you've ever seen one, and so it's the fermentation where all the fibre is supposed to be being fermented by the bacteria and the microbiome there and producing the energy that the horse actually uses. So we should be feeding the hindgut. This myth that the grain feed people will like to put out, that we need to feed the horse's stomach, is completely wrong. The stomach is really only evolved with horses eating a grass, high fibre diet, and only because there would be some grass seeds on the grass at certain times of the year, that was what the stomach was able to digest. But they weren't evolved, they didn't evolve eating grains on a high level basis the way that we are often pushed with the high grain feeds. And having a horse that's high on carbohydrates, we know that's not good for us, and we know it's not good for the horses. They need a much slower energy release, and then they are much calmer, they're much more compliant, and when they haven't got ulcers, then they are much more comfortable. No horse evolved to have horses, and yet I have heard equine vets saying it's not a question of whether your horse has ulcers, it's a question of how many. And quite frankly, if we are producing feed for horses that is causing ulcers to form in the stomach, it's absolutely not the right feed. The horse is telling us that with ulcers. And if we can't formulate a feed, which there's so many different companies all trying to do the same sorts of feeds, all using slightly different ingredients, if they can't formulate between them with all their experts a food that doesn't cause ulcers, which is what the suggestion, it's not how many, it's not if, it's how many, suggests, then we've got a problem. And we need to start solving this problem. But we need to educate the owners to understand we aren't feeding the stomach, we are feeding the hind gut, and we need the water to do that too for the performance.
Can I just jump in there quickly? At the moment, you're being sort of duped into thinking that if a horse is drinking like a mash with like a sweet mash with, there's a lot of grain in these mashes, some of these mashes, but because they're sweet, the horse will take in the sweetness of it. And it looks to you like your horse is drinking, but it's not actually drinking. Well, it's drinking, but the water isn't going where it should be. Where you think it should be, it's not. It's coming out in the urine. And the thing is, it's not being, it cannot go through to the cecum with the grain, because grain cannot go through to the cecum. So you've really been almost tricked into buying something that really looks like it does the job, but it doesn't. So with Hydrate, because it's grass, it does the job because it has the soluble fibre to take it through to the hind gut, and it can go through, with no restrictions.
So that's, as I said, said when I first started talking, we know that there are professional riders at the top of their game who are using hydration drip bags to try and hydrate their horse. Well, so much better if we can do that through their normal physiology. It means we're working with the horse, and I'm not saying that drip bags are working against the horse, but they're supporting it in a way that's actually unnecessary and hugely expensive to set up drips to do this. So let's get horses sort of on a prevention before cure mode, because and you might be surprised. My challenge to you is get some, try it and see what you think, and see whether your horses perform at a higher level, because that's ultimately what you want to have. And there's no harm. There can be no harm from having Hydrate. So give it a go. I was skeptical to begin with, and here we go. Let's bring the product into there we go. Try and get the light so it doesn't. So that's the product, and give it a go. See whether your horse is happier, whether they drink the product, which is obviously going to be the first indication that they like it. And if they drink it all and look like they want more, then they're telling you that they're dehydrated. And if you give them what they want, and then they perform at a higher level, and instead of getting that last fence knocked down, which is usually where the tiredness comes in that last couple of fences, then you know that you've actually had a result there. So you're spending big money going to these shows on your fuel, on having a lorry, on getting your car, all the time you put into getting ready for competition, and then you go to compete, and unfortunately you get a final fence down, and it's not all your hard work undone, but you're not getting the maximum performance out of it, and the maximum result that you could be getting. So try the Hydrate, see what it's like when your horse is more hydrated, funny enough, and notice it in your performance, notice it in your results.
Can I just say, you'll get when you get your sample, you can go on the site and get a free sample, excluding postage and packaging. But when you you go on the site, you get a little sample pack, and in there there's 2 litres. So what you do is you make up a 2-litre bucket, and you offer it to your horse. And some horses don't know what the liquid is. They know it's a feed because they can smell it, but they don't know. So you have to sort of train them almost. And once you've made up 2 litres, let them have a drink. If they don't drink it, you also get a little bag of chop, just grass chop, just to make it into a chewy feed that they recognise. But then they get the flavour. They understand that it's a feed. And then so if you have to say maybe another sample in the actual postal pack, you get 2 packs of these. So you've then got another pack that you can then offer again as a liquid. And then you're training your horse to have it a different way. And they do. Once they've got the taste in their mouth, they realise what it is, and they will drink it. And you can feed up to 10 litres in 30 seconds.
Right. And the other thing that crosses my mind is obviously people will give electrolytes and things now, but a lot of those electrolytes are made up with, ground up minerals that aren't actually very bioavailable. And at least when you're taking, the Hydrate, you're getting all the trace elements and minerals that and salt and everything that would normally be required, but it's in a much more bioavailable form as well. So, there's no point giving electrolytes if it's not actually being absorbed and the horse can't use it.
What electrolytes just change all the osmolarity of the cell and shrink all the cells and get the body to source water. And so if there isn't the water available, the horses can become even more dehydrated.
Yeah.
Whereas Hydrate is palatable, it's uptake by palatability. So because they like it and it's like a feed to them, they will take as much as you offer them. So you're not changing all the osmolarity of the horse's body. You're not changing the physiology. You're just saying, here, have a drink. Just like getting a Costa coffee.
Indeed. so that deals with taking your horse to compete, whether it's show jumping, dressage, or eventing, or endurance. As Sandra said, she's had a lot of experience with top level riders at all of those disciplines. And you might wonder why you haven't heard about it. Well, I've been involved with sports supplements before, completely different on the human side. And I can tell you now, if you get something that really works, I've had professional sports people saying to me, don't tell anyone.
Yeah.
And that's it. If you find something that makes that big a difference to your performance, that they don't want everybody else to know. And so, probably those riders who are having drips probably might not think that other riders are doing the same, and they're getting an advantage. So you can get that same performance but in a much simpler, easier way. So that's competition. Is there any other area where you think Hydrate would be useful?
Absolutely.
Obviously traveling.
Yeah, traveling is one of the biggies. You don't, like I say, you don't realise that your horse is depleted while it's traveling. But like Roger said earlier on, they do lose a lot of fluid through sweat and through nasal expulsion.
Water vapor just from breathing in your lungs, and especially that depends on the humidity of the air, the temperature of the air. So obviously, as we're going into summer now, we've had some hot weather now, and we haven't had any rain for a while, which is going to be a problem with grass. So
grass, it dries up, doesn't it? It goes brown,
exactly. So
and if you can give your horse some a drink before you put it in the paddock, and you can give it, mainly if it was EquidGel, probably that would be the better one if you were doing it that way. But if you notice that your horse is dehydrated, do a little pinch test on its neck to see if it is. Then you know that you can just grab your grab bag out of your feed shed. It gives you peace of mind knowing that you can give your horse a drink at any time, and it's so valuable as horse people to know that.
Yeah. And then, I know people put molasses and things in water, but it's not quite the same. You're still getting that sweet sugar hit. And it's not, what we're trying to avoid is these sugary, carbohydrate driven horses that can have problems. And if, it creates problems with ulcers, it creates problems with behavior, and that can manifest, especially if we've got hindgut ulcers. They do exist. If we get problems with hindgut ulcers, then it'll change how they gait. So they might even think you've got a lame horse and you haven't. But obviously, and that's something you need your vet to check out and see what's going on. But remember, hindgut ulcers, you can't scope for them in the same way. So it's actually better and more cost effective. I'm doing myself out of work here if I was a regular vet. But it's cheaper to try a product like EquidGel and the Hydrate that actually help horses not have ulcers in the first place. And if that sorts the behavior problem of your horse out, or there are some herbs and things that you can use as well. So if you've got a serious case, then you can sort of combine them all. And if your horse stops behaving the way it was, then that was ulcers. You don't have to get a piece of paper saying that that's what it was to work that one out. So that's a little tip there to save you a bit of money.
And the other thing is, though, as a first aid product, I'm not saying that veterinary, any issues you should call your vet straight away anyway. That's not the point. We have to make sure that your vet's involved. But as a first aid method, you've got something that gives you peace of mind. If you think that your horse just needs to drink something, You can't offer it water because it won't take it because of the stress it's under. But it will always, 9 times out of 10, it will always take, hydrate because it's a feed. Their instinct to forage is so strong that it will override their thirst mechanism every time.
And of course, from a veterinary point of view, another time where, if you've had a horse with colic and you're wondering what to put it back onto food, because especially if it's an impaction colic,
in surgery,
or had surgery, again, or even something like grass sickness. I mean, God forbid any of your horses get grass sickness, but it does occur.
That's another thing.
So if we can get some fluids into them, but also some nutrition at the same time, then that's really going to help let the gut recover from, especially if it's been surgical. If it's been handled, that's one of the dangers post surgery, is that the gut peristalsis, that movement that mixes and moves the food along, that can often stop. And so if we can get everything to flow along that much more easily, then the gut will kickstart work that much better after surgery as well, any sort of abdominal surgery. So it's just a way of recovery. I mean, if any of you have had surgery at all before, or not felt very well, your mum used to give you scrambled egg or something, something that was easy to eat and something easy to digest. Well, think about Hydrate, and is that in that situation, and the EquidGel obviously for the more daily feed side of things. But in an emergency situation, or post surgery, or if you're worried that your horse might be getting a bit dehydrated for whatever reason, then if you've got some Hydrate handy, then you can give it, and hopefully see off any problems before they become anything where you do need a vet.
If you get past the tub over, I just want to show the tub, because the tub that we do as well, this can go on your lorry, this can be sat in your feed room, and it's the tub. So that we actually do a refill for that as well. So you can have the tub, and if you run out of the tub, we can send you a refill. So this is always wise to have on your lorry, because if you do stop on the way to a competition, breakdown, for instance, you can't take your horse off the lorry, and you could be there for 4 or 5 hours in your lorry waiting. So really, it's something as like a peace of mind.
Well, I mean, the other thing that springs to mind is if you're again, God forbid, your horse lorry breaks down at the side of the road, you're going to be stuck there. So it's stuck in traffic, just traffic jams. Especially if you're going to somewhere like Dover. If you're going abroad,
you can be hours.
You can be obviously serious accidents on the motorway.
Stress brings on gastric ulcers as well. So your horse might not have gastric ulcers, but if it's in a stressful situation, it can develop gastric ulcers very, very quickly. So if you're feeding something like Hydrate or EquidGel, you've got that fibre mat, you've got less acid being produced in the stomach. So you're not going to be irritating these ulcers that are being formed because of stress.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't like to feed hay nets when they're travelling their horses either. So, if you do get stuck in that situation, if you haven't got a hay net because you perhaps didn't think you were going that far that you needed to have one, then obviously if you've got some Hydrate there, then you can always feed it. So I think that sort of wraps up Hydrate, doesn't it?
Really good, yeah.
I hope you found it interesting. I hope you've had a think. Have a think. You might be one of the people there sitting, my horses will get dehydrated, drinks plenty of water. Well, you just don't know. No. You only know what they do drink. And if they're drinking 90% or they're drinking 85% of what they could be drinking, actually, if you can get them up to that 100%, you might just find that you've increased your performance, but by a considerable margin, and also the health of your horse as well. So, it's worth a try. See what you think. The proof's always in the pudding.
Can I just say that quickly, though? If they drink lots of water, it's good, don't get me wrong, but water comes through the body very quickly. Yourself, if you go to the pub, you have a pint of beer, you want to be in the loo a few minutes later, or 20 minutes later. So you've got to understand, we're trying to get the water through to the hindgut, because when it's in the hindgut, it can then function in the body,
and then it's absorbed, and then it goes into the cells throughout and that's where electrolytes do help. It's holding the minerals in our cells, hold the water in the cells, but you need the water to be absorbed properly, and that you need to get it to the hindgut in the first place, and the Hydrate does that.
Brilliant.
Cool.
Cool.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.